Here's the deal. We have a nice vintage Suitcase. Ooh, real nasty in there, but nice color. The plan is to make a speaker out of this guy. I've got several of them I've made before in the past. For this one, I'm thinking of doing this 2.1. There's the amp. Here's a off-brand crossover. These speakers and tweeters are from a Alesis M6 studio monitor system that had amplifiers blown. Those things are notorious for having capacitor failure or some kind of power system failure. And I've tested them out. They are great sounding speakers. And I mean, they're real chonkers. This thing must be at least, this feels like 10 pounds. Super big magnets. And so that should be probably one of the best sounding speakers I've used in this type of thing. This is from a White Van special, if you know about that, you know. They sounded all right, you know. It came in little towers. There was blown speakers in the arrays, so I took them apart and have these. I mean, you can see they're like brand new looking. I got these from a previous project, speaker grills. You know, it looks cooler without the grills, but perfect fit on this. It kind of reminds me of a bug eye, though. But I'm hoping to get this done in one night and not drag this out for several days.
Spoiler alert, he did not get this done in one night and drag this out for several days.
I've taken measurements with my little caliper of the inner diameter and outer actual space taken diameter. Gonna cut that out on some cardboard with this fancy hole circle cutter. And then lay it out, mark it out. I have some circle cutting drill attachments, blast them out, fit them in. Then I think one of the hardest parts of this always is mounting and arranging the internal components in a way that looks nice. I pretty quickly realized there was no clean way to cram the sub, the woofers, and the tweeters all under the front without it feeling overcrowded. So I decided the sub is going on the back. From there, I marked out the circles to cut using a caliper to make sure everything is centered and spaced evenly. Once the centers were marked, I used the Dremel to put a small dent in each center point to bite when I get the circle cutting attachment on the drill. Looking at the lining, I really wanted to save it because it's pretty, but way too nasty. My plan was to take it out and clean it up and see if I could reattach it later. I also marked out the port, just keeping it simple with one single port this time. I didn't really film this part very well, so here's a quick recap. The Suitcase walls are super thin wood, and I didn't trust them to hold the full weight of these heavy woofers, especially in the front. So I cut some scrap trim into braces for the front and back, glued and clamped them inside, then came back once the glue was dry and did a pass with the Dremel to reopen the speaker cutouts. Now the baffle's a lot stronger, the case is better reinforced, and the mounting bolts actually have some solid wood to bite into. So this is the porthole. I'm putting a single port in there just to have one, you know, little portal. Potentially give us a little bit more bass response on the front, even though bass is omnidirectional. Oh yeah, look at that, good. All right, time to get a look at how the fitting is. The speakers here. That's solid. Perfect fit. Why even give it the chance to get misaligned? We'll just Dremel dink it. Bit of a Dremel dink. So these came with little covers, which will make it look nicer. So what a quick last minute decision here. I really wanted to get these more in the vibe, so I was like, they might be nice if I could match to the gold accents here on the top. So I got some paint. Shit, I should probably do the tweeters too now that I think about it. I was looking at colors at the store. What do you know? Antique gold. Hopefully this matches close enough to the other hardware. Not too bad. So that looks normal. That looks wonky.
Look at this handrail. It's filthy.
It's a bastard.
What kind of chemicals do you even use to clean the handrail?
Scrub the shit out of it, I know that.
Who ever knows where this garage door tell me it's gold if they can know which one it is.
What am I supposed to be doing again? All right, so I've got this stuff mostly dry. Tweeters, covers. The tweeters. I was cutting out these little holes for the side contacts for the signal on the back of these so they'd fit in, and I realized there's 10 of these extruded connectors here. If I put it in like this, it sits ½ inch off of the wood. If I were to cut it all the way off, there'd be nothing to support the screw in there. So I gotta drill the holes, get those ready. These are all marked out. Just gotta pre-tap. Far too many holes. And I've decided against building in the screen for protection. I just can't do it to the speakers. They're so much prettier without it. It's not an ugly grill cover. I think it'll look nice, really, but I think I can devise a way to make it detachable. And it doesn't fit within the confines of this. If it did, I'd be fine. But my only option is to cut away at this and make it weaker just to fit this thing. I mean, it's so close. All right, phone to friend. I absolutely hate anything that has to do with a speaker grill, so that confirms that. There has to be a better way. It's the second time I've tried to use those speaker covers, second time I've painted a pair and not used them. All right, here we are, about 6 to 8 hours into day 2 of putting this together. Clearly, the projection of trying to get a one-day build was unreasonable. We've got the front mostly put together. I still haven't listened to these speakers for years. And with the amplifier, never been tested. And the whole MO here is cheap, you know, going inexpensive. But how inexpensive can you go until it's not worth the time you're putting into it? That's the question. So I'm kind of concerned about the cheapo amp I got. You can get it for like $8. You could probably get it for like $6. It is pretty looking so far. I mean, look at that. Originally, I was going to start drilling the holes in for the amp, volume, on, off, power, getting everything locked in there before I even put the speakers in. But now because I don't want to have come this far, 18 hours into the process and then finish it off with a shit amp and it doesn't sound good. We'll see. If I need to, I'll just buy something nicer. But these are studio monitors. They're meant to do work. They sound sick. And I've never heard them in an enclosure. I've only heard them pulled out. So saving that for tomorrow. Gotta go check on the lady before she gets pissed. Day 3, I haven't even been able to listen to these yet. Haven't got an amp prepared. Haven't started putting power stuff in place. All I've done is almost get the speakers installed. I hit a snag when I ran out of bolts yesterday. So 2 trips to the hardware store, one to get the bolts and the washers and then forget to get the nuts, come back to get the nuts. Nearly $60 for 24 of them, which is crazy. This is where a project will make or break. Either you get tuckered out and you lose motivation and it sits on a shelf forever, or you power through, but you also don't want to be so hasty when you power through that you don't do a good job and do something sketchy or do something that's visually ugly just to get it done. But this is really where you have to pick and choose your battles wisely. I only have like 2 hours right now too, so I definitely ain't finishing it. All right, so here we are later tonight, getting closer to the finish line. I've hooked up cables to the crossovers. I made spade connectors to connect to the input of these because they're the same shape as spade connectors, even though, according to ChatGPT, that's not advisable to use spade connectors in these little slots. ChatGPT was correct, that did not work. I'm gonna pull the cables out through the port for now, and then connect those to the amplifiers and do tests like that. Plug an aux cable in, power bank, so we should be connected. All right. That was what I expected, so let's see what happens when you do it with an amp that is on paper adequately powered. And if I didn't already say it, the sub on the back, when you have a rear firing subwoofer, it needs to vibrate sympathetically with the front. So that means you flip the phase. So when the front's pushing out, the back is pushing in. So they hopefully go like this and stay in phase with each other. Yeah, so I'll say that amp does what I thought it would do, which is put out volume adequate to what it claims it puts out. Does it put out the wattage it says it does? Not a chance. But does it put out the perceived wattage of what it says, which is consumer wattage, which is like half of what it should be? I say yes. I think this is livable.
Strike that from the record on second thought. That was shitty and not livable.
After a brief 2 days of waiting on shipping, I have a new amp. And it looks much prettier, much better made. It doesn't cost much different. I think it's like $15 or less, maybe. It's another 2.1 channel. I've used this kind of amp before. There's the model number. This one's clean. I trust the general build of these types. So after a brief test, this thing feels like it has about twice as much power as the old one. And definitely kicks. I gotta figure out how to mount it inside and how I'm gonna get the controls out through the top. So I have to mount these inside, soldering. It's a process. I've got crossovers stuck down in place, glued and screwed to the wood. Got these wires all snipped down to size, so they're nice and short on either side. These ones are going to the amp. Got the holes drilled where the 5 potentiometers will poke through here on the top. Very carefully boring out the size of an average potentiometer knob so that it goes down far enough to kind of hold on to the little potentiometer center. So I can get them just thin enough and round it out like a couple millimeters, then I can stick those bolts on there, have the knobs poking out, have the pots on here, and if I'm real careful, I can make it look clean. That's not bad. It looks sketchy with it off, but look, you can't really see any issue with that. I'll also put some glue on the back of the amp enclosure, stick that down with the bolts. That'll be locked in for life. I have this weather stripping, so it's like sticky adhesive on the bottom. What are you doing, mate? Get up there. She's having trouble jumping these days. Anyways, it's this weather stripping, and it has an adhesive bottom here, but then it has like a little arch going up over the top, and I cut each side trying to be precise, snip down the whole side, so I got the arch off of it. This is the thing I also mentioned in a previous clip about using cable jackets when you strip the cable, but I didn't have any long enough. I thought it'd be nice to have one entire piece. This is also what I used around the speaker to close it in and try to get it airtight, but I didn't cut it up in that instance. So now I'm gonna try to lay this all around this little rim here, and that'll hopefully stop the sides from rattling and keep it more airtight, you know, like a normal speaker, not letting air fluff out the sides. I'm also trying to figure out how I'm gonna mount this amp in here. In the past, a couple times I was super sketchy, and I just screwed these in with the bolts through the top down onto these threads with the very thin little 1/16 of an inch of wood that you need to actually get threads threaded on there. You don't have much room to hold on to substantial wood, so yeah, that's not gonna work for this amp. It has a bit of weight to it, but also it's so thin up there, it's not gonna work out like that. I've glued in these washers in hopes to kind of reinforce it a bit more. So I'm thinking I'll kind of strap it in like that. And these are kind of bendy, so I've done something similar to that in the past. I think I can kind of get it roughly in position, then kind of bend it, clamp it down on the amp, and that should be enough support. I'm also gonna glue it to this side. Then I need a DC plug. I'm probably gonna go down in this corner. I need a aux cable. I wanna do a 1/4 inch, I think. You right there, mate? All right, it's about a week and a half later now. I've been testing the speaker as my main home sound system for my projector in my room, but I'm gonna finish it right. So despite having a very limited budget here, I've made some purchases. I did some spending on Amazon in attempts to get this thing right. 2-panel mount TRS plugs, very serious. Got one that's a pass-through where you can just take a TRS to TRS plug on the inside, which I'll have to solder up anyway, so I don't know if it saves me any soldering time, but I think having a modular option here is gonna be nice, and you'll see that theme continued. Well, you have to use the release plug. Yeah, it broke my nippers, so 5-pack of these. Here's the bigger purchase. 145 watt power bank. It's heavy-ish. Product model YSPBM25 Pro, 20 volts, 5 amps, 28 volts, 5 amps, 140 watt. So I can step up to 28. But that's interesting to know. So this must be a newer USB-C standard, because I know they have ones that go super high now. USB-C 1 plus USB-C 2, 100 watts plus 45. That's where they get the number from. Tricky, tricky. Oh, I get a cable, hell yeah. Looks decent, braided. It also has a voltage and amps reading on here. Let me plug my phone in. We'll see what happens. 9 volts, 0.4 amps, 5.5 amps. That's the end of the iPhone using its PD capabilities. It sounds good. Another cable that I've never dealt with before, like in this form with USB-C. So there's boom, into this female so that I can just do the same thing as I do with that audio one. If I use it, just plug a cable on the inside rather than fully wiring it up. This is a TRS as well. I guess I bought the same kind of TRS, but with actual soldering points on there. Onto the build. I think I'll be fine with 100 watts into that amp. Should be plenty, you know? Overall, I can live with that. All right, let me intervene here. So in this part of the build, in the original audio, I'm just kind of talking in circles, figuring stuff out in my head. Let me give you the short, actually understandable version here. I've got a USB-C jack and a DC barrel jack on the outside of the suitcase. I'm trying to decide how to wire them so I can power the amp and recharge the internal battery without constantly opening the case and moving cables around. I'm also trying to configure it in a way that I could use a DC power bank and a USB-C power bank interchangeably without doing some kind of duplicate wiring of everything. In past builds, this was easier because the USB-C power banks I used had separate high power outputs and a separate input for charging. I could leave both plugged in, use a buck converter to charge the bank from the wall, and flip a switch to choose whether the amp ran off the battery or directly from the DC jack. With this power bank, the main headache is that the same USB-C port's used for both charging and output. USB-C power delivery has to negotiate what it's doing, and it really only wants to talk to one device at a time. So there's no simple way to hack that with a basic switch without getting into full-on USB-C wizardry, which I'm not doing for this particular suitcase speaker build. So at this point, I basically accepted that with USB-C, I'll have to crack the case open and swap some cables when I want to recharge versus when I want to run the amp off that battery. The DC side is much simpler. It's just a plus, a minus, so I can feed the DC jack into the amp and to a DC battery at the same time and let it charge while also powering the amp and playing. The last piece is the power switch. With USB-C, the plan is to run the little CC line from inside the USB-C cable through an external switch so I can effectively turn the USB-C power to the amp on and off, and ideally use the same switch to cut the positive line on the DC battery as well. One switch, 2 power options, and hopefully not too much smoke. I've got my connectors taped up and scuffed, getting ready to paint them. We've got 23.2 or 0.1 millimeter as the hole for this. I'll give those a couple coats.
Bro, what about your aux? Do a quick clear coat, at least just a little bit. You don't finish it.
Whole time, we'll do aux, do USB-C. All right, well, I give that stuff just a little bit longer to cure with the paint outside. I've got this PD trigger board, USB-C, and this is a real easy one. You see it's got these 3 switches here. On the back, you've got 5, 9, 12, 15, and 20 volts. We're all good there. So that'll provide my, highest possible voltage out of the PD board into the amp. Got this beautiful TRS, a little springy tip here to go into the amp on the inside. I found the cable. Oh, here's one, the guy. Ah. Trick. Here we can have a look at the current state of the inside. Got my aux cable plug right there, coming down and through. Boom, perfect size right into the aux. This is USB-C. I've got the DC power over here. Power switch, thinking it'll go next to the handle here. One step at a time here, getting closer and closer. All right, so before I can test my USB-C bank to see how that works, I've got to get this PD trigger module into a DC plug. It may look a bit messy. Perhaps it is. It'll look nicer than seeing little bits of wood grain around the rims of these things, you know? Got the juice switch. Black, yellow LED. And I had some of these around, but they were not high enough amp rating. So 20 amp will definitely do the trick. Let me interject here. I'm just staring at this wiring diagram, rambling, trying to think of how I can make this one power switch do multiple jobs. The idea is this switch on the outside of the suitcase can work with either a simple DC power bank or a USB-C power bank, as I previously mentioned. So I wired a DC barrel jack in and out of the switch for a normal 2-wire DC battery, which allows the LED to work as well. And I also ran the cut USB-C CC lines through its own little set of barrel plugs. With the DC battery, the switch just interrupts the positive line like usual. With the USB-C battery, the same switch cuts the CC lines instead, which basically kills the power delivery handshake and makes the bank shut off. It's a slightly unorthodox way to go about it, but it lets one switch control both power setups without turning this thing into a whole extra project. All right, power cable complete. Just to the amp. There's power in. Tested, good to go. Now I just gotta cut the hole for this. A stroke of luck, I have a hole cutter that's the exact size, basically 18.5. Failure. So I'm trying to think of how I'm gonna rectify this now, annoyingly. My only idea is to take some of the scrap from other parts I've cut out and create a square that'll cover the whole space. I guess I can live with this. I mean, with the light at this angle, it doesn't look great, but I think once the button's in there, we might be all right. Back to the USB-C. It'll give me remote shut off. I just need to access the CC line. So here we go. I gotta do this very carefully and not cut into the little wires inside the jacket here. All right, I'm inside the USB-C cable here. Red, black, white, green, yellow. It's 5 connectors there. I think that's the bare minimum for USB-C PD negotiation. You have the ground, the positive voltage, the data plus and minus. I know you need the CC line to negotiate PD mainly. Yeah, there's no conclusive answers as to which color it would really be. There's no standard for these, unfortunately. Let's just get a starting point measurement here. With the PD module connected, 20 volts. Now just to see, sometimes cheap cables only like one orientation. Let's see if it likes the other orientation. Okay, 20 volts. So there's 24 pins in a USB-C cable, 12 on one side, 12 on the other side, to get it to do this reversible thing. So sometimes there's separate wires for separate directions of orientation. With cheaper ones, they're usually tied together, or one of the sides is just not connected correctly, so it only works in one orientation. So since this works in both orientations, I'm gonna guess the CC is tied together, and it's one of these 5 cables. I'm gonna say black and red is probably plus and minus. It's pretty standard. From what I've seen online, the most common thing would be yellow. It sounds like, based off what I've read, but I swear I remember doing that first last time and it not working. So I'm gonna trust my memory here. I'm gonna snip to green. Man, these things are very thin. My wire strippers probably won't even do it well. If I got the right one, I don't have to cut anymore. If I got the wrong one, I just gotta keep cutting and I'll have to do some resoldering here. Solid 20. Here we go. Aha, 0 volts, 0 volts. It's a good sign. Off. Hell yeah, success. Now the real question, that wakes it back up. You know, these are always like upholstered with nice fabric inside them, and this one had a pretty green silk fabric with the pockets on the side. This is the stuff I pulled out of it. There should be more than this, but you can see it's got doo-doo stains on it. It's after washer and dryer, so that's probably trash. There it is. Is it perfect? No. But at least it's not spent cardboard hanging off of it. I might go further if I know that this is going to be how it stays, but I also am considering upholstering it still with a different fabric. Move a few things. It's what the Chinese call violent fan. Violent, very violent. Woo! So prime. All right, let's look at this. Power, I'm gonna say it's kind of heavy. Let's put it on the ground. This is gonna go into here. So, gotta solder onto this. Here's a moment of truth. I've got my cable with my connectors that will go to the switch for the power, connected up to the CC line, my USB-C cable. Let's just plug all this in. So nice, all down to one cable for the battery. This turns on 20 volts, okay? This is great. This is technically almost complete. Hooray. I think we're good. And that USB-C cable in there that's going from the battery to the PD board could be swapped to just connect directly to the enclosure so that there is no battery power. You're just using wall power, USB-C. Obviously you can do DC wall power. Yeah, we're good. It works. The light on the power switch doesn't work when it's set up like this, but sick. All right, back for what is hopefully the final round of finishing touches on this thing. I've been field testing it. I took it out, Golden Gate part, and got some use out of it. People were still talking and stuff. They weren't playing super loud, but about a medium volume for 4 hours with this battery. And it was still at like 70% when I pulled it out. So that battery is definitely a good choice for this. What really needs to happen now is inside, getting all the wiring cleaned up, getting it routed nicely. And I'm gonna do a little bit of sound treatment on the inside. All this mess of wires here is what I have to address now. These are the clips I'm gonna go for here. AliExpress, something like that, I think. That's where I got them. But yeah, they have these little locking clip mechanisms with a little like spring on the inside to keep the cables kind of tight in there, and then you can push out and over to unlock them. These work pretty good, but the adhesive is not good. So I'm probably gonna just super glue on top of the adhesive that's on there. I'm gonna do all that on both sides, I suppose, to minimize the possibility of stuff rattling around in here and to get it out of the way for when I do the sound treatment stuff. All right, I think this is cleaned up pretty nicely. You can see these little clips all through everything. Got this locked in here. A couple clips on the way up. This plugs in as an alternate to the wall power, which has to just unplug here. That fits up into there and plugs down into the USB-C bank, which gets Velcroed to the bottom there. So instead of nasty like fiberglass type of insulating, sound deadening stuff they usually put on the inside of speakers, this is recycled denim. A lot more pleasant to work with than that nasty other stuff. So I'm gonna put a layer of this all around the inside. So I suppose I have to take some measurements and then cut it out in a way that makes sense. I'm gonna probably use hot glue, stick it on there. It's super light, I think it'll hold just fine. All right, I'm about halfway there. Yeah, this has been not fun. Man, it's like being tarred and feathered with this crap. hot glue is already a mess. I used basically a whole pack already. But just hot glue and nasty remnants getting stuck that burnt myself several times. This has been a nasty endeavor. All right, I've made one mistake here. Back of the port hitting into this denim. So I could totally hear this. It was blocking the airflow. It was making it sound boofy. I don't know. All right, wish me luck on this. Didn't want to go too tight in the vise because it'll break the plastic, but too loose and it won't stay in.
I don't know if that blade's any better or that used one too. I think I would try it down to flip it around so it's this way.
It's just hard to get started once you get it.
Yeah, once it starts bouncing like that.
Been doing this real sketchy method here where I put a zip tie around this, stick it in the vise, and use it as like a flat sander thing where I can rub stuff up against it. All right, port is out and cut to size, 1.6 inch. I've never seen one quite so small, but the numbers say this is the right size, so I'm trusting it. Now, I've been having trouble getting this to fit into the damn hole, so I'm gonna carefully bore this out even more. Kind of inclined to just stop it here and clean it up a bit, but in the interest of being thorough, probably gonna cut some, shaped pieces to go in here since I got the space for it. It'll probably look even a little better if I do it nicely. Wow, that was a long and arduous task. I started this last night, finished it today. It must have been at least 3 continuous hard hours of work, if not more, just to get this here, and it still needs some cleaning up, but that's the majority of it. The last thing I addressed here was the metal rattling. I added fabric tape around the suitcase handle mounts and inside the lid latches to keep them from buzzing when the bass hits. You still got a little vibration here and there that's kind of unavoidable with a project like this, but it's definitely a big improvement and tamed enough that it doesn't really impact the listening experience in any significant way. Overall, I think it both looks and sounds great. This is roughly the 10th Suitcase speaker I've built over the last 10 years or so. And the early ones were super rough. I've been slowly refining the process, so it's something I'd actually feel good presenting or selling to someone and trusting that it'll hold up and do its job exceptionally well. And once again, everything in this project is upcycled for the most part. The suitcase and the speakers are all secondhand. I've got about $100 or less in fresh materials like the amp, cabling, little finishes. The build itself took around 30 hours maybe, plus some extra time sorting through footage and trying to boil that down into something watchable here for the video. I've got more projects on the way, different speaker builds, various electronics, audio things, little samplers, effects, circuit bending stuff, all kinds of different experiments, some of them filmed, some of them in the works. If you enjoyed this, please hit the like, subscribe, drop a comment with any suggestions or ideas for future builds. I'm still new to making videos, so any feedback's greatly appreciated. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you in the next one. It's the second time. Miko, you crazy. Miko, stop. Jesus Christ. Stop that, you crazy ass. She just did that 5 seconds ago, and then she fucking did it again. No, she's gonna go back. She wants to get inside this fucking tiny bag. Holy shit, you're crazy. You're crazy.